This is Will Buchanan reporting for the Walk for Liberty. Today is June 23rd, 2008, day 71. For some reason yesterday, even though my GPS watch seemed to be working fine as I was walking, once I finished my walk, I discovered that it hadn't actually stored the recording of it. That's supposed to happen completely automatically, so I'm not sure what actually went wrong. At least I still have the videos of the watch screen and the GPS coordinates from after I finished, so it's not that big of a deal. Slow vehicle turnout, no parking. Not only is there not much of a turnout, but the sign's not even facing the traffic. I just got back from a lunch break at the RV. Recently, I've been more frequently splitting out my walk into two different segments, especially since recovering from my earlier shin injury and since adding more miles. I find I do really like doing it like that a lot. I was kind of dragging before the break, but now after having a nice lunch break, I feel very refreshed. I'd like to get back to the discussion I was having with myself yesterday about a topic that one of my subscribers had requested. For those of you just tuning in, I had already talked about how inflation and the general increase in prices that results from it is something which is completely caused by the government because of the fact that it prints more money, i.e. inflates the money supply. Contrary to popular belief, prices don't just naturally rise as an economy grows. The only way you can have a sustained general price increase over the entire economy is for the government to print more money. So that discussion yesterday had just been some background information I had wanted to explore before directly addressing my subscriber's question. So to recap the subscriber's original request, he wanted me to discuss how just because there's inflation doesn't mean the government has to raise the tax rate in order to maintain itself. Since tax is a percentage, the government will automatically collect more as the economy grows and as the population grows and as the government inflates the money supply. So why would they need to increase the tax rate, since the government never needs to increase the tax rate? So they would want to increase the tax rate for one of two main reasons. One, if they want to grow the size of the government so that they can spend more. And two, if they had already exceeded their ability to spend money during previous generations by borrowing money. So they want to raise taxes in an attempt to collect more money in order to pay the interest on the debt, perhaps as an attempt to balance the budget. I'd like to point out though that just because the government raises taxes doesn't necessarily mean they'll collect more revenue. The higher they raise the tax rate, the less incentivized people will be to work more, since the less of their money they'll be able to keep. As an extreme example, I believe back during the 30s in FDR's administration, that the highest marginal tax rate was about 90%. That means that if you had already earned enough to be at that tax rate, for each extra $100 you produce, you only get to keep $10 of that. But why would you want to work any more at all at that point if you're only getting to keep 10 cents on the dollar? People who supported that probably thought it was fair, because if a person was already rich, they should have to pay most of their money to the government. However, not only does it end up hurting that person, but it also hurts everyone else by hurting the entire economy. Since at that point, the person is only getting to keep 10% of everything extra they produce, they're not very incentivized to produce any more goods or services. And you want them producing more goods and services, since the more that person, or actually anyone, produces, the cheaper prices are going to be for everyone. That's why the income tax is arguably the worst of all the taxes, since it disincentivizes people from producing more goods and services, which ends up hurting the entire economy. That's why some people have called for a national sales or consumption tax to replace the income tax. However, I think an even better idea is this. As Ron Paul has frequently said, why not replace the income tax with nothing, nothing, nothing? As Ron Paul has frequently pointed out, only about a third of the federal government's revenue comes from the income tax. If the federal government were to reduce its budget to the levels of about the year 1990, then the income tax would no longer be necessary and it would still be deficit neutral. So I say, just pass the exact 1990 budget and simultaneously get rid of the income tax. Just think of how much more prosperous and productive our society would become. People would get to keep all of what they earned, and so therefore would be incentivized to produce even more. And we'd see the greatest sustained economic growth probably since, well, ever. The income tax has had its day. It's time for it to be history. I didn't quite beat my record-breaking Scottish Day 69, but I came within a quarter mile. And unfortunately the handheld GPS battery died, so this will have to suffice for the GPS position. This is Will Buchanan for blog.walkforliberty.com, signing off. For some reason when we got here, the entire campground was closed. So we ended up just parking along the side of the road. While waiting for me to finish my walk today, John exercised his artistic muscles by creating some rock art. What do you call this one, John?
Man puking in river.